Welcome back. Our fourth talk this morning is from Richard Friend, Shutamus Kalsuk, and Nopranu Sajalak Dirititi. This is a hybrid presentation in which Richard and Shutamus will give a virtual account of work undertaken in their 2022 RDF project on participatory water quality monitoring for sustainable development. And after that, immediately following it, Nopranu will describe how this project has grown into a much larger initiative and some of the opportunities that will be extended to others to participate in it. So first of all, the video describing the initial stages, and then we'll immediately hand over to Nopranu to pursue the others. Let me give you some brief biographical notes. Richard is an associate professor in human geography and environment in the Department of Environment and Geography at the University of York. And from 2021 to 23 was research champion for risk, evidence and decision making at the university. His research focuses on the governance dimensions of social and environmental change, addressing the dynamics of rural livelihoods, water resources, water management, urbanization and climate change. Shutamus is a lecturer in the Department of Environmental Engineering and Disaster Management at Mahidol University. She's also established and acts as director of the Mahidol York Interdisciplinary Research Centre on Water and Waste, a research collaboration for action-oriented research and capacity building. And she's worked with multiple organizations, including the Thailand Environmental Institute, the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, and the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Nopranu is Vice President of International Relations and Corporate Communications at the University of Mahidol, as well as Associate Professor in Public Policy and Public Administration. Her research interest is co-production in public policy, focusing on lifelong learning for elderly people and other areas of education policy. Before joining Mahidol, her roles included senior specialist at the Southeast Asia Ministers of Education Organization's Regional Center for Higher Education, and she was senior program officer at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations University Network Secretariat. So first a video.
Hello everybody, my name is Richard Friend from the University of York.
My name is Shutamus Kalsuk from Mahidol University.
Today we'd like to spend a few minutes talking to you about our WNRDF project and how this project has contributed to broader institutional collaboration between the University of York and Mahidol University. Our RDF project has focused on challenges around water quality and water quality monitoring. Monitoring the state of the environment and water resources is a critical basis for ensuring good environmental governance. It's critical to understand what is happening within our water resources, how conditions are changing, what might be driving pressures on water resources, and how we can intervene to prevent water quality pollution and enforce environmental regulations. Our starting point really has been that monitoring water quality is a very complex process that is often beyond the capabilities of government or water utilities and requires much greater engagement by citizens, both as monitors of the quality of water and as a way of holding potential polluters to account. Our project has really been structured around two areas of intervention. One has focused on understanding the situation in one particular water basin, river basin in Thailand called Mekong River Basin. And this has included a series of desk reviews of policy and institutional context, as well as reviewing the data available on water quality to assess changes over the last couple of decades and try and understand the reasons for changes in water quality, and a process of interviewing key stakeholders involved in water quality management, as well as water users. Another key area of intervention has been looking at the role of schools as potential mechanism for participatory monitoring and incorporating water quality into the curriculum in schools and building a network of schools operating across the basin. And I will hand over to Jutamas to talk about the school interventions.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Yes, so yes, we focus on school. So we start with the one school first. This school is very active. We provided help in teaching their teacher on how to do active learning through STEAM education, and we use water quality monitoring knowledge game toolkits as a tool for STEAM education. Next slide, please. So we taught the teacher to play this board game. Our team, we developed this board game for Mekong River Basin, and which can fit the context of the school as well. And then school teach the students, and through this, students could develop a good understanding toward water quality. They realize that activity that they do every day actually pollute the river in their own area. So they also can raise their own awareness. Next, please. We also provide them toolkits to check water quality. We did this laboratory setup with the student. We tested at our university first, and then tried some new equations for a student to be able to link different parameters together, and also can link to the activity, how this activity can contribute to the pollution. And then the teacher learned from us, and then the teacher teach the student. Next. And then at the end of the course, kids could develop their own project that they want to do, that they want to contribute to their community. And then we provided them small seed funding for the kids to play around and to test their own idea in the community. Next, please. So the good thing of doing this project in their own community is that we get their parents engaged, we get other people in community engaged into the project as well. So it's like expanding from school boundary into the communities of their own environment. And we now trying to connect them with other schools nearby, that they can be like a trainer instead of us. So the teacher from this school can also teach other school, and the teacher from other school can teach their own student as well. So this we kind of expanding the network naturally. Next, please.
So in addition to engaging with the schools directly, we also, as I mentioned earlier, conducted a series of desk reviews and field studies, and used the opportunity to bring together a number of different stakeholders across the Mekong Basin, particularly local government, members of the River Basin Committee, and central government actors, to review the findings that have emerged from these studies, and to also use the game that we tested with the schools as a dialogue tool that brings different stakeholders together to look at different scenarios of land use and their implications of different land uses on water quality, and then to use the game to also look at potential actions to reduce the impacts on water quality. So through a series of workshops and consultation and dialogue, we came up with a set of priority challenges and actions, really summarized as a recognition that we have very limited monitoring technologies in place across a very large and complex basin, and that there's a need and an opportunity for expanding this network of technologies, particularly taking advantage of the kinds of activities that the schools have undertaken and other new participatory, more handheld monitoring technologies. There's a recognition that the data that is currently collected through the government system does not address sufficient range of parameters, and that we really need to be looking at some other potential threats to water quality, as well as expanding the accessibility of the information that is being generated and making it more meaningful. A key area of concern really has been how the data that is being gathered through water quality monitoring is useful in terms of enforcement, in terms of making sure that different water users are not contaminating the river system, and that when there are actions of pollution, of discharges into the river, that action can be taken swiftly and effectively. And it was really recognized that one of the key areas for intervention is to support the role of local government. They often have this responsibility placed upon them, but lack the institutional capacity, the technical capacity, the personnel, and the financial resources to be able to act effectively. And this whole process of working together around water quality has also contributed to us developing an interdisciplinary center between the two universities.
Yes, so from our success, we're working in collaboration between Mahidol and York. Now we set up Mahidol York Interdisciplinary Living Research Center, where it will be like a playground for staff from both campus, both university to work together. So Mahidol University put the initial investment in lab technologies, and now both university provide seed funding, and our team will work on water wastage in this river basin. Next, please. Yes, so this joint unit, we will focus on two areas. The blue color is we will work together, we will perform work together, like exchange of our staff, research, and doing research together, providing seek for funding together. And the green one is to like a collaborative network where we will focus on exchange staff between the two and exchange students for curriculum, joint capacity building program for staffs, and joint conference, which will be happen in the future.
And finally, I'd like to talk about an additional project funded by the Wellcome Trust that started in March this year as part of the Equitable Research Culture program of Wellcome Trust. And this is Valuing Voices for Equitable and Responsible Research. This is being led by the University of York, but Mahidol University is leading a program of work around global equity. And we're with the hope that Mahidol will guide York about what good international research collaborations and partnerships should look like. And I will hand over now to Dr. Noprenu to say a little bit more about the Wellcome Trust project. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, as mentioned by Richard earlier, that I will provide more information about the Valuing Voices for Equitable and Responsible Research, which we, both York University and also Mahidol University, we have initiated the project together, which is now led by Charlie Jeffrey. He's the Vice Chancellor of the University of York, who's not here with us today. The project, as mentioned by Richard, that it has already started in March, and we are like starting the project for about 2 months already. We had the meeting together last month, and this project, like he mentioned earlier, that this is a sort of a spin-off project inspired by the previous works being done by York and being done by Mahidol University together. We have a long history working together in several research projects, and two of which, as you could see, they are under the WUN RDF funding. And we also have some other projects under the Mahidol York Sea Grant funding. And the essence of this Valuing Voices for Equitable and Responsible Research project is, I think the project itself is very timely. As we listen to the discussion throughout the day yesterday, the things that we experienced from the collaboration with international partners, there are twofold that Sue already mentioned and some other colleagues already mentioned yesterday, that we have to tackle the sense and the academic aspect of why we are doing research. Does it have to be equitable and responsible? And that is one question that Sue mentioned, that it has to be done simultaneously with the how. And our leaders in the final section yesterday also mentioned about the how we are going to implement these guidelines. And we heard from several colleagues yesterday, the experience from the African countries. They managed to get the African Charter, as mentioned by Isabel. That is one thing that I think as academic and administrators, we all have to advocate for the cause, not only in Africa, but also in some other places around the world, especially in my country and also in Asia Pacific. So that is the reason why we put together the concept and also apply for the grants from the Wellcome Trust. So the objective of the project itself, we have 3 key outputs, expected outputs. The first one is to develop a toolkit. I believe that we could actually learn a lot from the African countries because they already had the African Charter developed by Bristol together with colleagues here in Africa. So I think that is one thing that we would like to come up with, coming up with the tools, or we call it in our team as a framework based on the principles of equity and responsible research. I will talk about that later, but the first output would be the framework where our researchers, especially young career researchers, could be utilized when they come up with grant proposals. The second thing is about once we already managed to get the framework done, the next thing is about dissemination and how we are going to provide the opportunity for our young career researchers and some other researchers to get themselves familiar with the concept of equitable and responsible research, because it doesn't come automatically. We all know that sometimes we apply for grants just because the granting agency told us the criteria. But I think at the trainings, we all think as a team that the training workshops for young career researchers, especially in our 2 universities, guidelines for them to come up with responsible and equitable proposals, those things should be done internally. And probably, I will talk about that later, how the WUN members could get involved. And the third one, which is a long-term expectation outcome that we would hope to see, at least in our 2 universities, is to have a long-term institutional change in research culture. And that would involve a lot of institutional commitment and adjustment, be it HR, be it financial regulations, policy attributions, or even leadership, the understanding of the leaders, those at the top, about equitable and responsible research, and not only about publication. That would be the things that we have to really communicate. Sorry, it is very small, but we just managed to develop the first draft of the principle of equitable and responsible research. I believe that we already mentioned about that throughout the day yesterday, the what, the who, and the how. And I think it's pretty much the same, overlapping ideas and concept. Definitely we have to work on it in the next 2 years to refine and redefine what we mean by principles of equitable and responsible research. Okay, so these 10 principles, I have to look here because I couldn't see it from there. So the 10 principles include the fundamental questions everyone mentioned yesterday. Like I said, the who, the what, and the how. And the what, for example, we think about public and stakeholder engagement. And you could see from the two projects we have done, led by Mahidol, and also the project Dr. mentioned earlier about net zero and sustainable city, and also the previous one mentioned by Richard and Juthamat, you would see that one of the expected outcome and output in our projects would also be the knowledge translation to the community. Okay, that is one thing that we put it as a flagship in our research culture, that it has to be translated to the community and also to address social impact, not only publications or not only to respond to the criteria of the granting agencies. So stakeholder engagement is one thing that we talked about, partnership with the local community. We also talked about co-production of research. Yesterday, we heard a lot about co-creation and how we would be able to engage more from the start, from the inception of the proposal preparation. I believe one of the leaders, I think Frederick from Lausanne, mentioned about PAR, Participatory Action Research, how we are going to encourage our researchers to engage more in participatory action research, or action research which would render us real solutions to the community. Okay, we mentioned about anticipation and mitigation of risks. Those are the what that we managed to identify at this stage. And for the who, we are going to address equality and diversity, EDI, and inclusiveness. That would be one of the areas that we are going to include. Ownership of research. Yesterday, many colleagues mentioned about who owned the IP, who owned the results of the research. We also talk about the involvement of trans and interdisciplinarity in the process of doing the research. The how, we talk about appropriateness, and to use Andrew's term at the end of the sessions, he mentioned about the context, especially the local context. So the appropriateness here means how we are going to address the right research question. That is not only about us, but is all about the society we are living in. Reflection, environmental sustainability, and also access to research after the end of each research project also echo about the responsibility of research project that as academic, as researchers, we have to all think about. This is even smaller, but it's just to make sure that you know exactly what we are going to do in the next 2 years. There are 3 work processes altogether. The first one, York team will be responsible for, because it's going to be about how to look into interventions internally within the institutions, especially the Global North, because the assumption here, which might not be correct after the end of the 2 years. The assumption was that in the Global North, sometimes the treatment of the collaborative partnership is not really fair. This is to use the word of the York team. They would like to correct this, for example, in terms of reimbursement, in terms of the share, the kind of the ownership of the work process or the results of the research. So it's going to be done internally by the York team, looking into team equity, into team intervention, and also it would involve some trials within your community itself, for example, HR adjustment or financial adjustment. So this work process would be under the scope of York responsibilities. For the work process number 2, which would be under Mahidol, and we would get involved all the researchers working under the WUN, RDF grants, and also those who are under the Mahidol York seek grant funding, which we already awarded 4 projects altogether last year. We are going to get them involved in this work process number 2 in order to identify the equity, the global equity interventions, meaning that we would like to look into the key success factor and also the limitation they have come across when they work together with international partners. It's not only about the partnership with York, but also the research partnerships elsewhere that they have been working. You have seen from Jakan's experience that she has a wide areas of collaborators. So we are going to tap into her brain and tap into her experience in identifying the limitations and also the key success factors working together between the Global North and the Global South. And the third work process would involve the dissemination of the guideline. We really hope that the guideline would be utilized, at least definitely in York and also in Mahidol University. So we have to make an institutional commitment. That's why Charlie is in the project from York side, because we would like to see things get going, at least using the two university as a platform to try it out. And what about the engagement that I'd like to propose? And I got a clearance from Matthias already to mention about this. In work process number 2, that, like I said earlier, that we are going to engage a lot of stakeholders, a lot of WUN members to share with us your thoughts. So the first step would be our exploratory work with international partners, not only the Global South. From what I listened yesterday, I think it would be fair as well to listen to the Global North in this exploratory stage. So I'm going to take that message back to the team in York, that we are going to engage both the Global North and the Global South in identifying research practices and intervention that can enhance equitable and responsible research partnership. The second thing that I'd like to propose is that we are planning to have the on-site training and workshop if we could successfully develop the framework in time at the end of this year. If not, that's still fine, because I think that apart from having the programs such as yesterday among us, WUN member here and also African countries, we would like to have the same thing, probably in Mahidol at the end of this year, and provide the opportunity for other younger researchers who would like to get involved. So by the end of this year, we would come up with the training and workshop programs, and also the opportunity for the Global North and the Global South members to share their thoughts, both, like I said, in terms of academic development of the equitable and responsible research partnership itself, and also the how. Because I believe that tapping into the experience of leaders from the WUN member would be beneficial for the project itself. And the third one, we are not going to end up only having the framework or the toolkits just for the two of us, just for the York and Mahidol. We would like to try it out as well using our existing platform that we are having, the York Mahidol Seed Grant Funding Project. And we are going to utilize the framework for the next lot, for the next call for application. And I think we will monitor the progress from the inception, from the proposal preparation, the methodology being used, and also the final output and outcome. So I think at the end, by the end of 2 years period, 2026, we would be able to come up with some other findings and probably practices, maybe not the best practices, but still practices that cover a wide range of the why, the how, and the who, and also the what. Okay, thank you so much.
We have a couple of minutes for questions. Don, then Daya, and that's probably all we have time for, just two. Yeah.
Thank you for that, and it was great to have the whole presentation in one, but it sort of goes back to fundamentals really, and it's about the notion of equitable and responsible research. and within the university system, how we incentivize that. Because actually a lot of the things that you were saying early on around motivations, and you talked about grant applications as one example, but motivations including career enhancement, a lot of the incentives are not necessarily aligned with some of the principles and practices that we're starting to focus on here around equitable and responsible research. So it's more of a sort of reflection back to us in terms of the systems and the incentives and the way in which we structure our future academic careers.
That's true. I totally agreed. I think the pitfall is probably at the funding agencies, whether or not they would put into their criteria about equity, about equitable and responsible research. I don't know. I don't know the answer exactly. But what we can do at the university level, what we have been trying to do is to, like I said, recruit young career researchers who would have the spirit to think beyond. And what we have been doing at Mahidol in the past few years, we have invested, like what Jutama just mentioned. The center itself, my division, we invested for the seed money to come up with the York Mahidol joint unit so that they can continue on. And that would be set as examples. And it's not only about this unit, we have other 19 units in the past 7 years. We are trying to encourage young career researchers like Jutamat and Takan to think beyond and to be confident about the future of research, that they could actually think about these aspects of research as well. We might not be able to invest a lot. That's why we need partnership. That's why I have to apply for additional grant, not this Welcome Trust thing, but I tend to apply additional grants from foreign governments. They have more in line in terms of doing research translation type of research, apart from the traditional granting agencies. So these international agencies, international organizations, foreign governments, they provide other venues for these researchers to try out their ideas about equitable and responsible research. So what I'm saying is that as administrators, we have to find ways to support our academic members. Like I said, it's not a lot, but at least it's better than having none. Yeah.
Thank you. Daya?
Thanks very much. I'm pleased that that this project is about equitable and responsible research. So, of course, yesterday we had the opportunity to engage in quite an intensive way around issues of equitability. When I say we, I mean those of us in universities and as a network as well, have I think, a major responsibility to promote, to engage, particularly with graduate students and early career researchers around the principles that would underpin responsible conduct and the practicalities of that as well. Fortunately, there's some really excellent literature around, guides that have been produced by academies and networks and the like. And, if I could just refer to one example, which is one that all of us should be grappling with when we engage with early career researchers, the issue of co-authorship. Who should be included amongst the co-authors? Should one tolerate courtesy co-authorships? What should be the order of the authors? Well, I must say I prefer the mathematics tradition where you list the authors in alphabetical order. The assumption being that everybody who's an author has contributed substantially, but I recognize that it's different in other areas. And these issues are, they can sometimes give rise to considerable tension within research groups where you have the PIC or the leader of the research group having a particular view. So how is the view of the graduate student or the earlier career researcher considered so that we arrive at, well, shall we say, at a fair decision, in this case pertaining to co-authorship? Thank you.
That's a comment or a question? I think I would take that as a comment, because that is one of the things that we have discussed as well in terms of the sequence of, or the order of the names in research. Yeah,
Thank you,
totally agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Our fifth talk is from Stephanie EJG Meme and Mary Idrisu. They will be describing the 2022 RDF project they led on supporting undergraduate nurses' palliative care education needs. This will be a virtual talk. Stephanie is a research fellow at the Mesothelioma UK Research Centre at the University of Sheffield, and she has a BSc and an MSc in nursing and also a PhD. Her work focuses on health and well-being inequalities related to age, gender, ethnicity, and ability. Mary is a final year PhD student from the University of Ghana and a registered nurse and public health nurse with 18 years of clinical practice experience in Ghana. She's an assistant lecturer at the School of Nursing and Midwifery, University of Ghana, and her research interests revolve around women's health, cancers, palliative care, ethical issues in nursing practice, and medical or surgical emergencies. So over to you. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Steph Ejegi-Meme, and I will be presenting with the very, very soon to be Dr. Mary Idrisu today. So I'm going to be talking about our project, which was supporting undergraduate nurses' palliative care education needs. Let's see. Okay, so I first wanted to start by saying that this was very much a community-led, nurse-led project. The initial idea came from the two nurses that you can, one of them is a nurse who leads Mesothelioma UK, a community organisation, and the other is leading a community organisation also focused on mesothelioma in South Africa. So we wanted to make it clear that this was a community-led, nurse-led project from the outset. So I'm not going to talk much about our actual findings today. I want to talk more about the how of the project. So it follows on really nicely from the presentation that we just had. But I will say that globally, it's estimated that only 14% of patients who need palliative care or end-of-life care actually receive it, and that's even less when you consider children's palliative care. And what we found is that a lack of palliative care training for nurses, who account for approximately 50% of the global healthcare workforce, has been identified as a barrier to patient access to palliative care internationally. And I mean, I guess palliative care is something that people try not to think about, you know, death and dying on a regular basis, but it will touch most of our lives at some point. So it is a really important topic. So furthermore, evidence suggests that many nurses do not feel adequately prepared to provide palliative care. So when we started putting this proposal together, we thought about obviously what would be attractive to you as a worldwide university network, and what would be useful for the community and for nurses. So when we thought about the Sustainable Development Goals, we thought, okay, we've got the third one, which is good health and well-being. That's very clearly in there with palliative care. Education needs. We knew that nurses needed better education on palliative care. So we've got that one. And then the 10th one is reducing inequalities. And that really is the focus of our talk, both how we try to reduce inequalities for patients, for nurses' access to palliative care, and also within our research team, how we try to reduce inequalities in that way. So what I'll do now is hand over to Mary, who will talk about some of the work that she has been doing as part of this project.
All right, thank you very much, Steph. So I am an early career who was brought onto this project, and then I have been involved in a literature review. So my first assignment was to lead a systematic review paper that looks at the palliative care educational interventions among nurses in lower and middle income country. So through the paper, I was mentored to develop an abstract for presentation at the World Research Congress in Barcelona. That ended last week. So I was sponsored fully to participate in person in Barcelona. Then I'm also involved in collecting data, and this data is about palliative care education interventions among nurses, nurse educators, and nursing students in Ghana. So we are doing focus group discussion, which is also ongoing. Then again, I am supposed to also partake in a palliative care webinar series that seeks to inform the research community about palliative care education interventions in the lower and middle income countries starting tomorrow. I must say that I have benefited immensely from this project as an early career from this part of the world. I have received mentorship from senior colleagues from across the continents, from different universities. I am grateful to WUN for supporting this project, and I pray that more of such projects will be in the line to support people like my kind. Thank you very much. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Mary. That's amazing. Okay, so I wanted to spend the rest of our time talking about the nitty-gritty. I'm sure you've had some very smooth presentations about findings and how well everything worked. But I wanted to put a bit of a spanner in the works and talk about some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities that were presented through this project. So bearing in mind that we started with 7 institutions involved, that went down to 5 because of retirement and life, just other things got in the way. But we were really keen to try and tackle in our own little way global inequities. So for example, in the original proposal, we said, right, we're going to have our in-person meeting in the UK. And very quickly found, visas are going to be really tricky. Trying to navigate and make sure everybody gets over to the UK is going to be quite tricky. So we decided to hold it in South Africa. You can see 2 photos on the right there of us at the meeting. But Mary's visa didn't arrive in time. And Mary is, as you can see from the previous slide, a key part of the team. So we were all really disappointed that we didn't make it happen. So I guess now is the point to say, I'm also an early career researcher, so I'm sort of feeling my way through this project. It was my first international project that I've led. So what we did, as Mary said, is we managed to get Mary to the European Association of Palliative Care conference last week. But honestly, Mary, I hope you don't mind me sharing that we had visas rejected, WhatsApp sent on the weekend. Steph, can you help me write this letter for the visa? It's like, my goodness, I had no idea that there was, that these were the challenges that you face. So I think there's something about recognizing if you want to try and work in equitable ways, it takes a lot of energy and effort that I'm not sure is always recognized by large institutions. But we got you there. That is the main point, I think, which is great. So the ethics process has been really tricky to navigate as well. So we wanted to undertake focus groups in each of the 5 institutions we're working with. So they're based in New Zealand, Ghana, Uganda, South Africa, and the UK. Yeah, that's us. And what happened was that it's been really hard to get the ethics through, even with the amazing support of people like Danielle Bertrand and other kind of professional services staff who've been just amazing. But I must admit that Worldwide Universities Network have been really good about no-cost extensions. I think you all know how difficult it is to get these things through. So the data is slowly trickling in, but it hasn't been as fast as we would have liked. So maybe if I had to write the bid again, I'd probably write in more administrator time. I don't know, but it's just something to think through. And in terms of funding allocation, we wrote into the bid that our partners in the Global South would have more funding allocated. So I think one gentle criticism of this funding is that I think it assumes that PIs on these projects will be on permanent long-term contracts, which isn't my case, which means that I was trying to, for example, conduct the systematic review in my evenings and weekends, and it very much relies on the goodwill of your superiors, which I do have, but it's quite tricky to not have any funded time for the PIs. But the opportunity that presented was that you could hire research assistants, which meant that Mary, who has done a far better job of the systematic review than I would have done, has been able to take the lead on that, and will get a first author publication, out of that opportunity. So in a way, it worked out how it was supposed to. And then impacts and next steps, I've got this nice little network down here, because I think before starting the project, I envisioned as a group we'd all move forward together to develop proposals. But actually what's happened is that we've had some offshots, and because we've got such an interdisciplinary team, some people are more community focused, some are hardcore academics, some are nursing educators, but not necessarily PhD holders. What we've ended up is the nursing educators are looking at curriculum development and working in that area. Then you've got the academics who are looking at developing an MRC bid to take this work forward. And then the community organisations are starting to work together and do their own networks and do what they need to do to try and get asbestos court cases up and running. But that's a presentation for another day. And then what really aligns with the previous presentation is that we have just submitted a paper, which is we've called the PEPPER checklist, and it's promoting equitable global palliative care research. We've developed a 5-question checklist because one of the beauties of this project is that you've got early career researchers like myself and Mary working with very experienced professors from the University of Ghana, from Makerere, from the UK, from University of Sheffield. And so that collaboration has been really valuable. And I really do feel like it's been quite reciprocal, because you've got these experienced professors with lots of knowledge on, how to kind of make an international collaboration work. Then you've got newer researchers with different ideas coming up as well. So those conversations have been really interesting. And it's funny, you were talking about authorship in the somebody asked about authorship in the previous discussion. So for this PEPPER checklist, for example, I've gone first because I've done the most work, and then I asked the community partner who sort of initiated all of the idea whether they wanted to be second or last author. I know there are different disciplinary norms, and I think they chose to go second. And then I asked the professor who's been supporting me, Claire Gardner, if she would like to be last author. And then everybody else in between, there's about 15 people in between, has gone alphabetically. So I don't know if that's equitable, but it's one way of doing it. And I will say the team's been very forthright in making sure that early career researchers get those publications that they need on our CV. So really supporting Mary and myself. Okay, so in conclusion, we are a team of people who are really dedicated to ensuring high quality palliative care research and also delivery of palliative care happens. And yeah, I feel like this Worldwide University Network funding has allowed us to do that. So thank you very much.
We now move to our last presentation of the morning from Alicia Ndlova at the University of Cape Town. Alicia will present the work that derives from the RDF project she led from 2021 on political and institutional determinants of human development in sub-Saharan Africa's resource-rich economies. And she'll have a particular focus on her experiences of being an early career researcher, principal investigator, leading a project alongside completing her PhD. Alicia is now a lecturer in the Department of Political Studies at the University of Cape Town. Her research and teaching interests are in the political economy of development and mixed methods research. Her current work focuses on the governance of Africa's mineral and fuel deposits, and specifically how to translate these non-renewable resources into socially inclusive and economically sustainable development practices. Leisha.
Good morning, everyone. I am very excited to share my experiences with you, and I'll tell you why very soon. I will talk about the research itself, but I want to emphasize what I have learned leading a project, because I think research is not only about external impact, it should also transform us as researchers. So who do we become through the process of research? So when I began teaching, I was overly concerned about attendance in the classroom. I expected a high turnout due to the importance I placed on the subjects I taught, such as comparative politics and political economy. However, a student feedback noted that one thing they did not like about the course was that the lecturer complained to students in the class about students who were outside of the class. This made me realize I should focus on engaging those present and understanding with compassion why others were absent. So my attention shifted to supporting those who genuinely wanted to attend the class but faced obstacles such as not being able to travel to campus for class every day. I am excited to speak to you today because you are dedicated to collaborative research and to understanding how to bring more people into this room. So thank you for being present and for your tireless efforts. I would also like to just give a special thanks to Ms. Vilna, who brought the WUN and RDF fund to my attention, a fund that has greatly benefited me. Not only have I grown professionally as a researcher and educator, I have also grown personally by being more confident in articulating my values. So our research explores the role of political institutions in ensuring the use of extractive industry revenues for development. But maybe you have a question. Why focus on political institutions? It was in 2014 when Ghana's parliament had just convened an emergency sitting to approve loan agreements. I met a middle-aged man wearing sandals and a cap, holding a big brown envelope outside of Parliament. I was waiting to interview a parliamentary official as part of my PhD work. He was waiting to ask his MP for a job. Perhaps to reassure me that there was nothing sinister about this, he said, "Oh, it's not just me. Others come to ask for money to pay for school fees for their children, hospital bills, and even to conduct funerals." His claim mirrored findings of a survey in which Ghanaian MPs reported spending a lot of time with various personal requests from their constituents. As a PhD student who was unemployed, unlike this man, if I needed a job in South Africa, I could not even identify one MP out of the 400 in Parliament to give my brown envelope. I could identify a specific political party that is supposed to represent me, but not a specific person. So in Ghana's first-past-the-post system, voters elect MPs directly with their local constituency, facilitating a closer link between each voter and a single MP. In South Africa's closed-list proportional system, voters elect parties, parties receive parliamentary seats based on their national vote share, and party leaders appoint loyalists to parliament, breaking the link between any particular voter and any particular MP. So even for ordinary people with brown envelopes, institutional variation matters. So this research has been quite rich, not in terms of our obsession as a team with studying how political institutions operate in different countries. For my PhD, I looked at Ghana, Mozambique, Namibia, and Zambia. And for over 2 years, I spent time in these countries speaking particularly to elites. With this Wound Development Fund, I wanted to speak to local communities and not focus on macro-level institutions. And what has happened is that since 2022, we have grappled with the role of political institutions and accountability mechanisms in these African contexts. But during this journey, we have made some exciting discoveries about what matters to the people whose well-being we want to see improved. For those of us who are used to working with formal or macro-level institutions, speaking to people, for example, in a resource-rich traditional kingdom, further refined our ideas about political institutions and accountability when we had to understand the intricate relationship between traditional leaders versus those who are locally elected officials. In the case of the Royal Bafokeng Nation, which is in the northwest of South Africa, my fellow collaborators were quite surprised to realize that in that local context, traditional leaders appointed councillors, but these councillors also had to work with elected councillors. And so they didn't really understand, so how does this actually work? And who must be accountable? And who do the citizens actually hold accountable? We also needed to address questions that were raised by locals beyond the development issues we were concerned with, such as what they refer to as cultural intrusion caused by mining operations which tend to attract migrant workers. Furthermore, we also had to think about contestations around identity and belonging concerning decision-making about the distribution of mining resources. So to us, it might seem like, well, the revenues are here and it's quite obvious who should benefit from them in a particular community. But it wasn't like that, because the people we spoke to would raise concerns around not everybody who lives here should benefit from these resources, because some just appeared recently. Others have been here for a long time and therefore should be given a much louder voice. So there were many learnings even between us as researchers too. One researcher had never been to the African continent, and she asked me, why would I stand and greet people as if I knew them? She would always ask, do you know them? And she was unaware that in contexts like that, a greeting goes beyond a simple hi to a stranger to saying, how are you and how is the family, even if I've never met them. This opened a cultural dialogue between us, getting to understand and to know that where we come from often shapes how we approach research and the questions that concern us. These are some of the unreported reaches in collaboration. So what progress have we made? Regarding the progress we have made so far, I want to emphasize commitment, the diversity of publications that are expected, diversity of audience we present to, and diversity of networks we engage with. And these are all deliberate decisions that I've had to make as a principal investigator, not alone, because as you will find out soon, the team is quite diverse, and senior researchers, I wouldn't say automatically, but they took up a mentorship role because of the environment that we created in the research team. Commitment is important because if I am a project leader, who am I leading? So there is an expectation that I cannot lead myself. For any project to be successful, everyone must be committed to that project, and full attendance and engagement in these meetings can be a measure of that commitment. And I'm very proud to say that throughout, we would have 1 or 2 missing people sometimes, but generally everyone would attend these meetings, and so far we've had about 16 online monthly meetings. Secondly, we had 2 research workshops, one in person for the researchers to deliberate on some of these issues after our fieldwork, and another where we engage people who actually care about the questions we've been asking. We also, of course, engage diverse networks who work in the resource sector, such as the Extractive Industry and Transparency Initiative, colleagues from the Southern Africa Resource Watch, which is an advocacy group, as well as Good Governance Africa. Our publication outlets have been diverse on purpose because we wanted to speak to different audiences. One of the current ongoing projects is a special issue with the Extractive Industries and Society Journal, where we are having about 7 original papers. And we also have 2 policy briefs that are directed towards public officials. 2 articles have been published with Good Governance Africa for research advocacy. By the way, in the spirit of always not wanting to delegate tasks that I do not understand myself in future, I actually committed to organizing, budgeting, hiring venues, booking flights, and learning the entire experience or process from defining a project to execution. And I know that when I receive more funds in future, I might not need to do all of this, but I thought it was really important for me to understand the process so that whoever I get to work with, I can basically understand what they are going through. So what are some of the lessons that I have learned throughout this journey? Well, research is a long game, and I think when we start our postgraduate studies, we're never told to be patient. And patience is important, that there is no need for shortcuts, that maintaining integrity and appreciating the process is just as important. That means choosing carefully who to partner with and what to research. Diversity has been critical for me, not just in terms of expertise and geography, but also in terms of research experience, cultural background, and gender dynamics. The team, I did not only select established researchers. I thought it was important to include other emerging researchers so that they can be exposed to the same benefits that I had, but also for the point of solidarity, so that when I feel as though I'm frustrated, they would understand what I'm going through. Investing in relationships is critical. To genuinely care about people and to celebrate their wins outside of the project. When we met, we would ask what everyone else was up to, what they have been achieving outside of the project. Because sometimes, as a leader, you can be so self-centered and think everything is about you and this project that you've conceptualized. But recognizing that others are working hard, even outside of that space, encourages them to also be committed to the project that you are leading. Humility, for me, is the basis of research if we define it as recognizing the limits of one's knowledge, being open to new ideas, and valuing the contributions of others. Also, most importantly, I think we should value teaching and mentorship, because when I started this presentation, I started by explaining an interaction in the classroom. The students are the next researchers and decision makers. I hear a lot of talk about training graduate students, and I was sitting there wondering, why don't we take undergraduates just as serious? Because they're the ones that are supposed to move to postgraduate studies. And if we lose them at that age, then we will struggle much later. My main message is basically to say, let's be intentional. That is, make deliberate choices that reflect what we value in all that we do as researchers, educators, and leaders. This is the team that made all the difference and helped me to learn some important lessons. I also want to thank the people we interview because they constantly give us the gift of time. And finally, not least, I want to thank the funders for helping me to learn these lessons.
Thank you very much. We have time for some questions. Peggy, the mic's just coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for bringing that aspect in terms of funding. And what I've learned is the message to funders, that we should be patient, and take our time. But most of the time, funding is time-bound. So how do you manage the two to ensure that, you still have, that kind of funding? Mm-hmm. And number two, I was expecting to hear a bit more about how the communities deal with the extractive industry, which has destroyed the environment. Was there any, such on that? Do you have any information on that? Because that is a problem that many African countries are grappling with, particularly the Anglo Gold Ashanti, which is, a lot of countries together, and what they've left behind in terms of the extractive industry and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peggy, for that question. Let me start with the timelines, because that's something I wanted to actually bring as something that can be improved. I think for someone like me who's an early career researcher, it's important to note that I don't have existing networks that are waiting for me. I had to actually build from scratch. In fact, when I started this project, I emailed over 60 academics or so, many of whom I didn't really know. Some answered, some did not, some said no, and the few said yes, but I was excited to work with those who said yes. So it took me a while to build that team and then to begin to conceptualize the project. So it takes time to move from that, conceptualization to then implementing. And I think for early career researchers, one of the things you can do, I wouldn't necessarily be asking for more money right now. I would be asking for more time. Why? Because, there's a saying that the deeper the roots, the more likely that a tree will stand firm. So it's really for us to actually make sure that the work we are doing is just, quality work and not just chasing the quantity of what are the outputs, although those will come. And when they do come, I think it's work that we would be proud of as early career academics. In terms of how communities deal with extractive industries, this is a very important one because this research has actually allowed me to speak in spaces such as the Investing in Mining Indaba, which happens in Cape Town annually, where these companies that you're referring to are actually in that space and they're asking questions about post-mining communities. And I think what we really need to realize is the role that political accountability plays, because often mining companies get the license to operate from governments. However, they also need this what I call the social license to operate in their communities. And often this is where the contestations are, because expectations are built, promises are made, and people wait and wait and wait. And what we have as an accountability mechanism often in the framework of democracy is elections, which come every 5 years. And communities have raised concern in terms of their dissatisfaction around who actually should we be holding accountable for this. Because when we go to mining companies, they say they're reporting to governments, and when we go to governments, they say that it is a problem of mining companies. And so often, it's quite complicated because it brings into the fore the fact that the relationships that are there and the lack of clarity in terms of who should be held accountable is a question that still needs to be answered. All the way from the macro level political accountability mechanisms that we have through elections, and to understanding that communities who do not interact with power as we understand it, but who want to benefit from resources and want to see what we call development, and they do not receive it, what then becomes their recourse? And this is something that we've been trying to establish as a project to see where are these linkages and where do we find these institutions across the continent. Also, one thing I want to mention quickly is the diversity of these institutions. So when you speak about Anglo-Gold Ashanti or you talk about Ghana, the incentives for politicians are quite different in terms of the competitive party system. But in a country like South Africa or Namibia or Mozambique, the dominance of political parties brings concerns around accountability, but maybe hope in terms of long-term horizons.
Thank you. Tanzi?
Hi, Alicia. Thank you very much for that superb talk. For me as a PVC education and students, I was delighted that you began with teaching and ended with teaching, and you drew links between research and teaching throughout. I thought your lessons learned were brilliant, and I thought your use of story was wonderful. So I wanted to just ask you, potentially in another one bid or at UCT, how you envisage drawing, you mentioned undergraduate students, how you envisage developing a pipeline of students who you teach, initiating them into more of the research side of teaching, and what your ideas around that are. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. So I also teach research methodology at UCT, and I use a lot of my research as examples for students. And one of the first things I say to students is that, you all can theorize. And the first question I ask, I say, if you walk, so Cape Town is in Rondebosch. If you walk in Rondebosch and you see a homeless person, how would you explain why they are there? and students raise their hands and say different things. And I say, well, that's your opinion, but eventually we would need to basically ask a lot of homeless people in order to develop trends and patterns around that. So for me, I think it's so important to come as researchers, but as also educators in the classroom, so that students see how teaching and research actually interact. And also to see them as the future, to teach them in a way that says, one day, you will also be doing this research. And also, I think another thing I want to say is course development or course outlines, curriculum development. When I started teaching, we don't necessarily get trained as educators, but we are asked to develop curriculum. And what I noticed when I started Googling different course outlines, I realized that many classes start with theories of this and that. And so I wondered, so you teach the students and tell them this is the theory, and then after that expect them to operate outside of it. So I decided that that would not, in my classes, be the first thing, but it would be to ask the students, first of all, what concerns you about, what are the global concerns that you have, what concerns you about your own community, and what are your individual concerns? Having asked that question, after they answer, I say, how do you think we can address those challenges? And from then on, I can tell from which perspectives I can locate them. And it is only later that I begin to say, scholars, established researchers have actually done a lot of research about how we can address these concerns, and this is where they are. And that's how theories get introduced.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, thank you very much,
Thank
Alicia.
you.